I rise to ask on questions 111/2020 under my name to ask the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications. Can the Minister provide an update to Parliament on the repayment relief provided so far by the financial institution? Thank you.
I give the floor to the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications, the Honourable Ayaz Syed Kaib. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, as part of the COVID-19 response budget, but also prior to that with all our consultations with various stakeholders, we had met up with the Association of Banks, which are all the commercial banks, and some of the other lending institutions, and we reached an agreement with them that they would actually extend their support for payment or repayment relief till December of this year. I'd like to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, sir, to thank all those financial institutions. Mr. Speaker, sir, the repayment relief is provided both to individuals with personal loans and mortgages and also businesses and other commercial customers. Relief is provided for principal repayments where specifically needed, and in certain cases both principal and interest are also have been deferred. Banks have also increased their loan provisioning to account for potential default and losses. So, for example, there are people who may have very small amounts of loan, some personal loans. They may have been, for example, working in a hotel and may have borrowed $2,000 from the bank. They actually cannot make any payments whatsoever, principal or interest. So the banks have actually made a provisioning for it, deferred it. Some, of course, by making provisioning, they know that it won't ever be paid again. They made a provisioning of about $100 million in that respect. The Honourable Member has asked this question. When we talk about financial institutions, Mr. Speaker, sir, we actually talk about two broad categories of financial institutions. So you talk about commercial banks, which include the ANZs of this world, BSP, Bank of Baroda, HFC, Westpac Banking Corporation, and Bread Bank. Licensed credit institutions, Mr. Speaker, sir, include the Credit Corporation Fiji Limited, BSP Finance, Contiki Finance, and Merchant Finance. FDB also, Mr. Speaker, sir, has been providing debt relief. While both categories of institutions are in the business of lending, the main difference is that the commercial banks accept savings and term deposits and operate demand or check accounts. Licensed credit institutions, on the other hand, can only accept time deposits. Commercial banks and licensed credit institutions have been providing repayment relief to their customers in the past for short periods following events such as natural disasters. However, with the uncertainty of COVID-19, repayment relief has been unprecedented given the amount of loans that have actually been affected and the extended period of relief, which is really the critical issue here, because we do not know when things will normalize or go back to some form of a new norm. Mr. Speaker, sir, as of July 2020, the total value of loans provided with repayment relief by licensed financial institutions stood at $3 billion to 17,194 customers. These include the relief package offered by commercial banks, licensed credit institutions, and of course FDB, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, as of June, the total value of the loans provided with repayment relief was $3.6 billion, around 18,422. The reduction in the July period, Mr. Speaker, sir, reflects a notable number of 1,228 of business individuals who no longer need the relief in their repayment as the cash flow incomes have improved. So some have picked up, so less people now require that relief. Mr. Speaker, sir, the financial institutions, of course, are foregoing, Mr. Speaker, sir, around 40.3 million in loan repayments a month. Mr. Speaker, sir, this has, of course, been a trend throughout the world. One of the things we always have to be careful about is that if there is a provisioning for loans that are in doubt, and also if we have repayments, what the bank does is closely monitors the situation of the financial institutions that are providing debt relief. We need to look at how they're managing the funds and also to look at the stability of the financial system. Mr. Speaker, sir, while the trend of the non-performing loans have been increasing from 3% of total gross loans in December 2019 to 4.3% as at the end of July 2020, the capital positions of these institutions, Mr. Speaker, sir, have remained satisfactory for some at strong levels. So what the Reserve Bank is doing, Mr. Speaker, sir, they are regularly conducting what we call stress tests to forecast what would be the expected level of loss, and accordingly liaising with individual institutions, ensuring that provisioning levels are adequate and capital buffers are in place to mitigate the potential losses arising from the impact of the pandemic. Earlier today, Mr. Speaker, sir, we talked about confidence, etc. And I've just pulled out the figures of new lending. From April to July, Mr. Speaker, sir, of this year, $668 million has actually been given out by banks in new lending. The current liquidity, Mr. Speaker, sir, stands at $1.077 billion, and the foreign reserve stands at $2.3 billion, equivalent of about 8.7 months of retained imports, Mr. Speaker, sir. With this injection of liquidity and the foreign reserves going high, Mr. Speaker, sir, what is really interesting, even till today, we've seen that the yields on the government securities and the bonds actually have come down, which means because of liquidity, we pay less interest rate in that respect. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
I thank the Honourable Minister, Honourable Members. That is we now move on to the first written question for today, and I call on Felipe Pissoa.